AI, am I right? I mean, it's everywhere these days. Feels like it's evolving faster than, well, pick your analogy.
Faster than a teenager on a shopping spree.
Okay, yeah, exactly. One minute it's suggesting what you should buy online,
The next, it's composing symphony.
right? Or like writing the next great American novel. Wild.
It's definitely a wild ride. And that's exactly why this whole idea of responsible AI isn't just some futuristic sci-fi concept anymore, you know? It's about the choices we're making right now.
Absolutely. Which is why we're diving headfirst into this Foundations of Responsible and Sustainable AI by Naveen Balani.
Great book.
Yeah, I'm really enjoying it so far. So think of this deep dive as your crash course on how do we make sure AI doesn't become this digital dumpster fire,
Right.
but instead becomes this, force for good in the world.
And Bellani really gets that. You know, he cuts through a lot of the hype and gets to the heart of what matters, which is like, how do we even define ethical AI, especially in a world where, everyone has different cultures, different values.
Yeah, because trying to build AI with just one set of values in mind is like, I don't know, trying to assemble IKEA furniture using instructions written for a different planet or something.
Ouch. Yeah, that's a recipe for disaster.
Total disaster. So before we even get to those cultural complexities, let's just like lay the groundwork here. What is AI, according to our expert, Naveen Balani?
Okay, so Bellani defines it as a field of computer science that's focused on creating machines and software that can perform tasks that typically require human-like intelligence. And we're talking about things like learning from data, solving problems, even understanding human language.
Yeah. And adapting to new situations, right?
Exactly.
Which is kind of mind-blowing when you really think about it. Like,
Yeah,
we're teaching machines to think like us.
we are. And within that world of AI, there's a really important distinction to keep in mind. You've got your classic machine learning, the kind that's great at crunching data and making predictions like, what you might want to buy next. But then you've got the rock star everyone's talking about, which is generative AI. That's the AI that can write poetry, compose music.
Right. Generate those crazy, realistic images.
Exactly.
It's like, what's the difference between an algorithm recommending a song to you?
And one actually composing the next chart topper.
Yes, exactly. And I think that's what makes this whole deep dive so crucial. It's not just about, oh, isn't AI cool and how does it work? It's about how do we make sure it's being used ethically and sustainably every step of the way.
100%. We don't want those robot uprisings, right?
No, thank you. Let's aim for a brighter, more responsible AI-powered future. I like the sound of that much better. Okay, so how do we actually go about building ethical AI? Is there like a checklist, a set of rules?
It's a bit like baking a cake, actually.
Oh, I love a good baking analogy.
Right. So you can have all the fancy kitchen gadgets in the world, but if your core ingredients are off, your cake's going to be a disaster.
Makes sense. So what are the core ingredients for ethical AI then?
Well, Bellani lays out these 4 key principles, right? Fairness, transparency, accountability, and privacy. And what's interesting is he really emphasizes that these aren't just like abstract ideas, they have huge implications for how we actually build and use AI in the real world.
Okay, so break it down for me. Let's start with fairness.
Right.
What does that actually look like in practice?
Okay, so imagine an AI system that's used to, let's say, approve loans, right?
Okay, yeah.
If that system is trained on data that already reflects existing biases in the lending system, guess what?
It's going to be biased too.
Exactly. So building ethical AI means we have to actively fight against those biases. We need to make sure the data we're using is diverse, it's representative, and it's not just going to perpetuate these harmful stereotypes.
Right, because it's like you can't just tell the AI, hey, be fair.
Yeah.
It's going to learn from the data we give it.
100%. And then there's transparency, which is another big one. It's not enough for an AI system to just make a decision. We need to be able to understand why it made that decision.
Like, how did it get there?
Exactly. So think about a doctor using an AI-powered diagnostic tool, for example.
Okay. Yeah.
They need to understand the reasoning behind the AI's recommendations,
Okay.
right? They can't just blindly trust the algorithm.
Right, because if something goes wrong, we can't just put the algorithm on the witness stand and be like, explain yourself.
Exactly. And that actually leads perfectly into the next principle, which is accountability. When AI systems make mistakes, because let's face it, they will.
They're not perfect.
Nobody's perfect. But we need to know who's responsible, right? And how are we going to address those consequences? So Bellani really emphasizes the need for clear guidelines, clear mechanisms for dealing with any negative outcomes caused by AI.
So it's not a set it and forget it kind of thing.
Not at all.
It's like, when you teach a kid to ride a bike, You don't just give them the bike and a helmet and say, good luck.
Yeah.
You're there, you're guiding them, you're correcting their mistakes.
Precisely. And finally, we can't forget about privacy, which is a huge one, especially when you think about how much data these AI systems are dealing with.
Oh, yeah. Tons of sensitive information.
Exactly. So robust data protection measures, those are non-negotiables. We need to be building AI that respects our privacy and not erodes it.
Okay, so we've got these 4 principles: fairness, transparency, accountability, and privacy. And like you said, these aren't just nice to haves, they're essential for building ethical AI.
Mm.
But here's what I'm curious about. Doesn't what's considered ethical vary depending on, cultural values? Like what's considered right or wrong in one part of the world might be totally different somewhere else.
That is such a good point, and Bolani actually talks about this quite a bit in the book. It's not a one-size-fits-all situation at all.
It's like those travel guides that warn you about, like certain hand gestures being offensive in different countries. What's polite in one culture can be a huge insult in another.
Right. But with AI, the stakes are obviously way higher than just a social faux pas, right?
Yeah, for sure.
So Bolani gives this really interesting example. He talks about how Confucian values, which are really prevalent in many East Asian countries, prioritize things like respect for authority, social harmony.
Okay.
And he argues that this could actually influence how AI systems are designed and used in those cultures, potentially leading to more of a focus on AI that reinforces those existing social structures.
So an AI system that might be considered perfectly ethical in one part of the world could raise some eyebrows in another.
Exactly. And this cultural dimension, it adds this whole other layer of complexity to building truly responsible AI.
Okay, so let's say I'm tasked with actually creating an AI system. How do I actually go about building these ethical principles into each stage of the process?
Well, the good news is Bolani gives us a really clear roadmap for that. He walks us through these 6 key steps of machine learning.
Okay, like a recipe.
Exactly. And just like with our cake analogy, if you start with bad ingredients, you're going to end up with a bad cake. Same with AI. If you start with bad data, and by that I mean data that's biased, incomplete, not representative, you're going to end up with AI that reflects those flaws.
So garbage in, garbage out, basically.
Pretty much. So that first step, data collection, that's crucial. And it highlights how important it is to have diverse voices and perspectives involved in that process right from the start.
Right, because if the people building the AI all have the same background, the same biases, those are going to be baked into the technology.
100%. Okay, so once you've got your data sorted, the next step is model training. This is where the AI actually starts learning from the data you've given it. But here's the thing, what happens when the AI messes up? Who takes responsibility?
That's a good question.
Right. And Bolani, he really stresses the importance of meticulous record keeping throughout this whole training process. You need to be able to track the AI's every move, basically understand how it's learning, and if there are any errors, where are they coming from?
So it's like having a detailed lab notebook where you document every single step of an experiment.
Exactly. That way, if something goes wrong, you can go back, you can retrace your steps, figure out what happened. Okay, so now you've got your AI all trained up. It's ready to go out into the world. That's deployment.
Time to let it loose.
Right. But this is where things can get a little, I don't know, unnerving because now your AI is interacting with real people, making decisions that could have real-world consequences.
No
Right?
pressure, right.
Right, exactly. Which is why we need to have those ethical safeguards in place from the very beginning. Bolani talks about this idea of privacy by design. Essentially, it means making sure that data protection is built into the very core of that AI system.
So it's not just something you can just slap on at the end as an afterthought.
Exactly. It has to be a fundamental part of the AI's DNA.
Okay, so we've covered data collection, model training, deployment, but now I want to talk about what I think is the most mind-blowing aspect of all of this, generative AI. The stuff that can write poems, compose music, that's a whole other level.
It really is. It's like AI on steroids. And to be honest, it's pushing the boundaries of a lot of our current ethical frameworks because it's not just analyzing data or making predictions, it's creating new content.
Which is both exhilarating and terrifying at the same time.
Right. And Bolani breaks down the 3 main ways that generative AI is built, and each one comes with its own set of ethical considerations.
Okay, lay it on me. What are the 3 ways?
So first, you can train your own model from scratch, and this gives you maximum control over the AI's development, but it also means you're responsible for everything. The data, the architecture, the biases, all of it.
It's like building a house from the ground up. You have total creative freedom, but you're also responsible if the roof leaks.
Exactly. The second approach is to fine-tune a pre-made AI, kind of like customizing a car. You didn't build the engine, but you're responsible for the modifications you make.
So whose ethics are you using when you fine-tune an AI? Yours or the ethics of the people who built the original model?
That's the million-dollar question. And it really highlights why it's so important to understand the ethical implications of the tools we're using, right? We're not
Yeah.
just talking about lines of code here, we're talking about values.
We are. And what's the third approach?
The third one is the simplest, and it's using AI out of the box. It's super convenient, but you're basically trusting someone else's ethics completely.
It's like ordering takeout. Sure, it's quick and easy, but you're kind of at the mercy of the chef's hygiene standards.
Exactly. So no matter which approach you take, being aware of those ethical implications is crucial.
Okay, so we've talked about the ethics of building and using AI, but there's another really important piece to this puzzle that we haven't touched on yet, and that's sustainability. Because it turns out our algorithms have a carbon footprint too.
They do. And it's something a lot of people don't realize. AI, especially the training of those massive language models, it can be incredibly energy intensive. In fact, Belani mentions that training just one AI model can have the same carbon emissions as 5 cars over their entire lifetimes.
Wow, that's a scary thought.
It is. And it's a real wake-up call, I think, for the industry.
So it's not just about making the AI itself more efficient. It's about the entire infrastructure that supports it, right?
Hmm.
Like, where are these data centers located? Where are they getting their energy from?
Exactly.
Yeah.
And that's where this whole concept of green AI comes in. It's about making conscious choices throughout that entire AI lifecycle to minimize its environmental impact.
So training one AI model has the same carbon footprint as 5 cars over their entire lifetime. That's wild. But how do we even measure something like that? It's not like their algorithms have like a little energy efficiency sticker on the side.
You're right. It's not as easy as checking the MPG on a new car, that's for sure. But Belani actually talks about this really useful metric called the Software Carbon Intensity Score,
Software carbon intensity score. Okay.
or SCI for short.
SCI, got it. So it's like a nutrition label, but for AI.
Exactly. It basically gives you a way to actually quantify the carbon emissions that are generated for every unit of work that AI performs. So a lower score generally means a more eco-friendly AI system.
Okay, so the lower the score, the better. Got it. But what all goes into